Americans are now spending more on food than they have in over 40 years. Grocery prices have jumped over 25% since 2020. A pound of ground beef, nearly $7. Even the cheapest frozen meals aren't cheap anymore. So people turn to meal kits. A box on the shelf that says dinner in 15 minutes feels like a solution. But some of these kits are hiding more than just mystery meat. One was linked to multiple hospitalizations. Another contains nearly 2,000 milligrams of sodium in a single tray. And the one flying off shelves right now quietly changed its formula without telling anyone. So who's really in control of your dinner? When even a home-cooked meal comes with a side of deception, you have to wonder. Are you feeding your family or just trusting a label that's no longer honest? Watch closely. We're exposing 5 meal kits that should never land in your cart, and 2 that may still deserve a place on your table. Number 1, Hamburger Helper. This name wasn't supposed to come back, yet here it is. Back on shopping lists, trending on social media, even mentioned in earnings reports. Hamburger Helper, once seen as a relic of tough times, is now selling faster than it has in over a decade. Retailers report a 14% spike in sales over just a few months, and that rise tracks almost perfectly with the latest food inflation numbers. A pound of ground beef over $7 in some areas. A box of Hamburger Helper still under $2. People are choosing it not out of nostalgia but necessity, and that's when it gets uncomfortable. Because if a meal kit like this becomes the go-to option for millions during a food crisis, should we be asking what's really inside? Each box is mostly powdered seasoning, shelf-stable pasta, and instructions to add your own meat. It feels homemade. But break down the nutrition facts, and some variants top 1,300 milligrams of sodium per serving without including the beef or cheese. That's more than half a day's worth in one bowl. Then there's the lawsuit over the phrase "made with real cheese." The case didn't go far, but it did raise a question: how much cheese qualifies as real? And how many customers expect that claim to mean something more than a dusting of powder? The court dismissed the suit, saying no reasonable consumer would be confused. Maybe that's true. Or maybe people just stopped expecting honesty on a label. Online customers have started noticing other things. Boxes that feel lighter, sauces that seem thinner, pasta that doesn't cook the way it used to. Some call it shrinkflation. Others wonder if it's just part of the new recipe, but very few feel like they're getting more than what they paid for. Meanwhile, the brand is being celebrated. A popular TV show featured it. Food influencers are rebranding it as retro comfort. The price hasn't changed much, but the attention has. What used to feel like a backup plan is now being sold as clever budgeting. That shift says more about the economy than it does about the food. Hamburger Helper hasn't improved. It just stayed cheap while everything else got expensive. And in a moment like this where people are doing the math on every meal, maybe that's all it takes. But that's where the danger lies. Because once a product becomes familiar, once it blends in with your routine, it stops raising questions. And the companies know that. The sodium, the portion size, the vague labeling, they don't stand out anymore. They're just accepted. No recalls, no scandals, just small changes quiet enough to slip through. A little less pasta, a little more filler, a label that says cheese but doesn't say how much. And that's the part nobody talks about. Not what they added, but what they slowly took away. So the question isn't whether it's safe, it's whether it's still what you think it is. You decide. Coming up, a kit tied to multiple illnesses and a recall that didn't get nearly enough attention. Number 2, Fresh Realm Chicken Alfredo. The name sounds harmless, chicken Alfredo, but this one box carries whispers that can't be ignored. In June of this year, Fresh Realm issued a recall for specific trays of chicken fettuccine Alfredo after public health officials linked them to a listeria outbreak. 17 confirmed illnesses, 16 hospitalizations, 3 deaths, and 1 pregnancy loss, all tied to something many would have considered a harmless dinner option. The meals in question weren't sold under some obscure brand either. They appeared under names most shoppers recognize market side at Walmart, Home Chef at Kroger. They sat in refrigerated sections. They looked like dinner solved. So how does a ready-made tray end up carrying a pathogen known to survive cold cling to surfaces and pass unnoticed until it's too late? The answer may never be singular. Officials are still unsure where the contamination occurred, whether it was during preparation, packaging, or transport. What's clear is this: the system allowed it to happen. From factory line to dinner table, the product passed through multiple layers of handling. Each point along the chain represented a chance to detect the problem or miss it entirely. In this case, something slipped through. The recall was labeled voluntary. But consumers were urged to discard or return affected products immediately, to clean surfaces, to avoid contact. Because Listeria isn't just a bacteria that fades with time or heat. It lingers, it spreads. And for people over 65 pregnant individuals, or those with weakened immune systems, the risk becomes life-threatening. What's harder to quantify is what wasn't reported. How many households still have one of those trays in the fridge? How many mild cases went undiagnosed? How many families ate the product never knowing they were at risk? The spotlight only found this story after the numbers grew too large to ignore. That's how recalls work. Quiet until forced into the open. By then, damage is already underway. And what makes this more unsettling is the context. Fresh Realm was marketed as a modern, smart solution for busy households. A safer, fresher alternative to fast food. It promised convenience without compromise. Yet behind that promise lies a fragile ecosystem, one where cold temperatures and corporate partnerships can only do so much. When cost-cutting meets speed, what happens to safety? The people affected by this recall didn't buy something experimental. They bought dinner. That's the part that stays with you. So maybe it's not about this one brand. Maybe it's about how much trust we place in the trays we heat and serve, in the labels we glance at, and the names we assume are safe. Keep this one close. Because if a tray of pasta can carry this much consequence, what happens when the next name on the list isn't fresh at all, but engineered to look like it is? And that's where we're going next. A company selling health meals with a reputation that raises more than a few eyebrows. Number 3, Metabolic Meals. A meal kit that frames itself as health-focused has quietly stepped into the glare of a very dangerous spotlight. Metabolic Meals, riding on promises of nutrition convenience control, is now under investigation for a multi-state Salmonella outbreak connected to some of its home delivery trays. 16 people across 10 states have reported illness. 7 of them were hospitalized. So far, no confirmed deaths, but that fact alone doesn't erase the fear. The meals under suspicion were delivered during the week of July 28th. The flagged ones include 4 cheese tortellini with pesto and grilled chicken low-carb, chicken teriyaki with vegetables black garlic and ranch chicken tenders, with roasted vegetables and sliced top sirloin with roasted peanut sauce. If you've bought from them recently, that boxed-on tray might no longer be the answer you thought it was. Investigators haven't yet pinpointed exactly where the contamination crept in. Was it the protein supplier, a plant surface, or a temperature slip during transport? That unknown is precisely what chills. A system that sells you health meals must manage cold chains, sanitation cross-contamination risks, all the hidden margins. Once one link cracks, the chain reacts. Consider the psychological weight a kit marketed to people trying to improve their diet, possibly those already managing health conditions. When your meal is supposed to be part of the cure, not the problem, how do you untangle trust from convenience? And the corporate side Metabolic Meals says it is collaborating with investigators and has notified affected customers. But no formal recall has been declared. That means in many homes, trays may still be chilling quietly in fridges. The advisory is clear: do a label check and discard meals with those lot codes. Clean everything and wait with vigilance. Online coverage shows something else. The average age of those affected is around 56. Over half are female. Most had no expectation of danger when they ate what they thought was a safe, balanced kit. Their trust was implicit. But here's a twist: because the outbreak happened in kits branded for health for people who care about what they eat, the sense of betrayal is magnified. It's not just food gone bad, it's a promise cracked. Also consider how this case may press into regulation gaps. Home delivery meals often escape the kind of scrutiny given to mass-processed food. When a kit ships direct, when a brand promises premium, the assumption is high but oversight is patchy. That gap lets dangerous ingredients drift in. In homes with seniors or with folks whose immune systems are weaker, the risk feels more like a knife aimed covertly. Salmonella symptoms, fever, cramps, diarrhea may begin within hours or days. For a healthy person, many recover in a week. But for others, it can spiral fast. So while some videos will continue praising meal kits, helping through high grocery costs, what happens when the kit itself becomes part of the threat? What happens when the system you trusted adjusts behind the label? What Metabolic Meals teaches us is that even the kits that wear the badge of healthy are not exempt from breakdowns. The next time a kit arrives pristine, you might pause, wonder what's hidden beneath the packaging, and that pause is what we need. Because in the list ahead, we've got kits that never had this level of attention, but may carry risks even greater. Hang on. Number 4, Reese's Fine Foods. When a brand you've barely noticed pops up in recall headlines, that's when you start asking harder questions. Reese's Fine Foods quietly announced a voluntary recall in October of last year after it became clear that some of its meal kits included chicken from a supplier that had itself been recalled for possible Listeria contamination. The supplier Bruce Pack had pulled nearly 10 million pounds of ready-to-eat meat for that reason. The recall covered specific meal kits labeled under brands like Bistro 28 and Don Pancho sold across 30 states. Kits such as chicken burrito bowls, street tacos, quesadillas, chicken enchiladas, all under scrutiny. Reese's noted it would no longer source from the affected facility. But recall notices are fragile things. Some products with best-by dates between September and November were flagged. Owners of those kits were urged to discard or return them. Store shelves were cleared in commissaries and suppliers. This kind of recall isn't always dramatic, so few voices rise to talk about the ripple effects. But for people living on fixed incomes, senior households, or families relying on convenience, the impact is tangible. Today, 2 things converge: 1, your trust in a safe dinner kit. 2, your limited margin for error. Imagine you bought a Don Pancho Chicken Street Taco kit for less than $5. It seems harmless, familiar. You heat, assemble, serve. But somewhere upstream, a pathogen may have slipped past the layers intended to protect you. That tray might carry more risk than comfort. In a fully functioning system, each step, slaughter, processing, packaging, refrigeration, is audited. But when a supplier is under pressure, when costs tighten, corners might blur. One inspection slip, one machine not sanitized properly, one temperature control lapse each is a crack in the shield. What's worse, many consumers may not even realize they own one of those kits. They don't subscribe to recall alerts. Fridges don't beep. The news cycle moves on. Meanwhile, that kit sits quietly waiting. Listeria infections in higher risk groups can take days, even weeks, to produce symptoms: fever, muscle aches, gastrointestinal distress. For a medically fragile person, the difference between a mild headache and hospitalization can be thin. The scope of distribution was wide: Alabama, Arizona, California, Colorado, Florida, Georgia, Illinois, and many more. 30 states were named. That means a kitchen in Florida and one in Oregon could both hold a recalled kit. Red flags should cross your mind. Now here's a twist. Reese's claim is that the problem lies entirely upstream. They're not saying they did something wrong in their own plants. They're pointing to a supplier whose issues were known. A defense, perhaps, but also a reminder of how little control the brand might truly have over its entire supply web. Ask this: how many brands will point upstream when trouble surfaces? How many will quietly pivot suppliers without telling customers? The absence of transparency is as telling as any label. For someone cooking for aging parents or managing immune compromise, that absence can whisper danger in quiet moments, like when checking a label under dim kitchen light. None of this means you must reject all meal kits. But for Reese's Fine Foods, the recall makes it a case study in how complexity can conceal risk. What seems like a local kitchen solution is tied to a national network of sourcing profit margins, oversight gaps, and shifting accountability. So, as you close this section, in your mind, hold this question lightly: if your next meal kit had a hidden flaw, not in its recipe, but in its chain, would you ever notice before it was too late? Next up, a kit, once trusted for its fresh ingredients, now exposed in a controversy over greens gone wrong. We're moving from meat to produce to, let's continue. Number 5, Sam's Club gyro sandwich. A piece of cucumber, a dab of tzatziki, In December last year, that small detail became a national red flag. Sam's Club's Gyro Sandwich Express meal kits, those you might have assumed safe, were recalled because the cucumbers in the included tzatziki sauce were linked to salmonella contamination. The recall wasn't for the meat, not the bread, but the veggie you'd least suspect. They were shipped to Sam's Club warehouses across the country. The recall also extended into other grocery chains via Gyro family kits. When cucumbers, the kind of produce we think of as innocent, turn dangerous, something deeper is at play. The cucumbers were traced back to a supplier under recall, Beloyan Farms of Arizona. Because Fresh Creative Foods used those cucumbers in their kits, the meal kits became part of the recall chain. That means dozens of kits sitting in American homes may contain a hidden hazard. Salmonella is not a mild risk. Symptoms can begin within 12 to 72 hours: fever, abdominal cramps, diarrhea. For healthy adults, the ordeal might pass after 4 to 7 days. But for children under 5, seniors, or people with compromised immune systems, things can escalate fast. Now notice this, the recall was voluntary. Some kits may still lurk in freezers or fridges because not everyone sees a recall notice. Sanitize your containers, discard affected kits, refund via Sam's Club. Those were the instructions. But in real households, instructions don't always reach every plate. You might think, but who would let a cucumber kill someone? But the system doesn't rely on intention. It relies on layers of control: supplier vetting, transport, refrigeration, surface hygiene, plant cleanliness. A slip at any point fragments the safety net. In this case, the vegetable layer cracked. There's another twist. Many consumers likely assumed that meat-based kits held the big risks. But here the villain was vegetable. That flips assumptions. It asks, when we distrust processed meats, do we blindly trust fresh greens? The blind spot is real. Every chain, farm to packer to shipper to supermarket, is part of your dinner. When a supplier fails, the fallout may appear in your kitchen without warning. Kits that look safe now carry question marks. For an older adult watching every label, or someone managing chronic illness, that question mark isn't academic. It's a sudden decision: do I risk it or toss it? And if those vegetables are part of the flavor layer, you can't simply cook them away without spoiling the meal. To complicate it further, not a single reported illness was tied to these kits before the recall. That often happens in recalls. The headline comes after the danger grows large enough to be noticed. Some small cases go undetected, misdiagnosed, or dismissed. The silent ones never make news. In the grander view, this recall reveals how little margin for error is left in the food packaging world when costs are squeezed and ingredients cross states. When a brand treats the cucumber as low risk or fails to update suppliers, quickly kitchens become vulnerable. Also notice retailers like Sprouts were involved in similar recalls for Gyro family kits. That suggests the problem wasn't a single store. It was a shared network of distribution and ingredient sourcing. The ripples spread beyond a Sam's Club shelf. Yet in the marketing push, the kits still look wholesome: grilled meat, fresh vegetables, flavor wraps. The narrative remains something you can trust because you assemble it. But when one trusted ingredient betrays the label, trust fractures. So as you close this section, imagine the very vegetable meant to add freshness might carry a risk no sign tells you. When that small fresh component becomes the weak link, dinner becomes uncertain. Next, we'll move from meat and vegetables to brands that push you toward comfort but with hidden shortcuts. The list is almost complete, hang tight. Number 1, Sunbasket. Sunbasket doesn't shout from the rooftops that it's perfect. Instead, it leans into a quieter promise: more organic, more sustainable, more care. It markets itself as a kit that does better by the ingredients: antibiotic-free meat, wild-caught seafood, mostly organic produce. Many users report that the produce arrives in good shape: sauces, balanced flavors, reliable. In a world where so many kits are taking from you, Sunbasket at least seems to try giving. But that at least matters a lot. Sunbasket did face backlash over its organic claims. In past years, consumers filed complaints saying that, while its marketing implied all organic in practice, only some produce was organic and meat had none. The company adjusted its messaging. Now it speaks of organic and sustainable ingredients, and adds a note when substitutions from conventional sources occur. That shift suggests Sunbasket is aware of the tension between ideal and practical, and yet it hasn't escaped all criticism. The Better Business Bureau assigns it a grade of F in some reports, citing unanswered complaints about unused food, unexpected charges, or poor customer service. Some users say boxes arrived with spoiled components or missing items. Those reports don't prove systemic failure, but they remind you that even the more premium kits have to wrestle with logistics, packaging, transport, and human error. Here's where Sunbasket's appeal matters most to some viewers. It admits to trade-offs. It doesn't hide substitutions, it tries transparency, it doesn't promise miracles. You see labels that show how much sodium calorie counts and ingredient lists that aren't dressed up beyond recognition. For folks cooking for elderly loved ones or managing chronic illness, that doesn't guarantee zero risk, but it gives a surface to scrutinize. When your kit shows organic lettuce if available or protein antibiotic-free, those are flags you can check against your own needs. The fact that Sunbasket publishes those assertions means there's something to push back on. It's also a signal the distance between the companies you avoid and the ones you consider safer isn't absolute. It's gradient. Sunbasket doesn't escape supply chains, cross-contamination risk, or cold chain failure. But by emphasizing the closer control over sourcing and substitutions, it narrows the blind zones. Is Sunbasket safe enough for your table? Maybe. Maybe not, depending on your sensitivity, your risk tolerance, your health. But compared to kits quietly changing formulas, quietly shrinking portions, or quietly recalling trays without alerts, it stands in a different light. A light you can question, but one that doesn't vanish entirely. So if you've watched every cautionary story so far, now take a moment, reach for a Sunbasket box in your mind. Turn it over, read those labels, see what choices are in your control and see where they're not. Because trusting a kit is never blind. It's conditional. Next, we'll look at the second name that holds promise and how it compares under this same lens. Number 2, Blue Apron. Blue Apron operates differently from many kits chasing flash. It leans on consistency, transparency, and a legacy people remember. Over the years, it has faced criticism, missing ingredients, late deliveries, complaints from unsubscribed customers, but no major recall scandal in recent history. That relative quiet is a signal in itself. The company makes public its relationships with farms, posts origin stories for proteins and produce, and publishes full nutritional data for most recipes. That kind of visible traceability appeals to those who demand more than glossy marketing. For someone serving aging parents or watching sodium intake, being able to see the weight of meat, amount of oil, and calorie counts gives a sense of power to reject what doesn't align. Yet that transparency isn't a shield against every risk. Food safety is still subject to cold chain breaks, cross-contamination, plant sanitation, all factors beyond what a marketing sheet can promise. A kit may arrive intact, but what happened in transit or at the processing facility may hide in shadows no label reveals. In some consumer forums, Blue Apron users report late substitutions, receiving a different cut of meat or alternative vegetables when the original proved unavailable. Others claim that box insulation didn't keep temps low enough on hot days. These incidents don't equate to recalls, but they are cracks worth noticing, especially for people with weaker immune systems who can't assume every switch is safe. One twist when many kits race to promote premium, organic, ultra-fresh Blue Apron held its ground by not over-promising. Because of that, some critics say it looks less flashy. Yet for skeptical audiences, that restraint can feel honest, a brand that doesn't stretch labels to fit hopes. For seniors or those living with chronic illness, the stakes are higher. A minor bacterial slip that a strong body shakes off in 2 days might lead someone older into dehydration or hospitalization. In that frame, a kit that offers ingredient clarity and predictable portions becomes more than convenience, it becomes a buffer. But again, Blue Apron is not infallible. It still trades in perishable goods, exposed to many handling points, from farm trucks to processing lines to last-mile delivery. No system is perfect. The question becomes, how many blind spots are you willing to accept? Compared to kits that covertly shrink serving sizes or quietly reformulate recipes, Blue Apron gives you something you can measure, literally. You can weigh your protein, check your greens, audit your label. That doesn't eliminate risk, but it fractures it into pieces you might notice before they hurt you. So when you look at a Blue Apron box, think beyond the promise. Peel back the packaging. Check what's inside. See where it falls short, and decide whether its transparency offers enough cushion for your peace of mind. So here we are. 5 kits that turned your trust into a transaction. 2 that might still be worth your fork. But after everything we've uncovered, the question lingers louder than ever: how much are you really willing to risk just to save a few dollars on dinner? Because when the package looks clean, but the system behind it is cracked, who's really in control of what ends up on your plate? Maybe the scariest part isn't the bacteria or the downsizing. Maybe it's the realization that you've been feeding your family based on assumptions. So next time you reach for a meal kit, don't just ask what's inside the box. Ask what's behind it.
This video does not promote division within the United States or encourage segregation. All content is presented for the purpose of exploration, analysis, and fostering discussion based on current events, public sentiment, and social trends. We fully respect the United States Constitution and all federal regulations. If today's analysis made you think, drop a comment so we can keep the conversations going. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you will never miss our next independent deep dive.